Good morning, everyone. Can anybody hear me? Yes. I do not have a strong voice, and I apologize for that, but I'll try to speak loudly. We were here a couple of years ago, and before I begin, I just want to say thank you so much for not only allowing Diane and I to be here. We are from Hot Springs, Arkansas. We're not too far from you guys. We're in India about a third of the year, probably. Spend the rest of the year visiting congregations such as yourselves and making our home in Hot Springs. I'm one of the elders there at National Park in Hot Springs, so if you're ever in our hometown, well please look us up. I'm going to have a variety of slides behind us. 2 years ago, we were here, and I gave you kind of the lecture version of what our role in the Ron Clayton team, or the India Missions Church of Christ team in India. I've been going to India for about 34 years. My wife's made 12 to 15 trips, so we're pretty much full-time. The last 6 or 7 years, I was kind of part-time. My first few trips were with Ron Clayton, so I knew him. Someone threw out the name Michael Hughes. Who said, yeah, I know Michael. He spent some time on the team as well. So just kind of, I owned a small business for years in Northwest Arkansas. We kind of gradually retired over the years. My wife was a registered dental hygienist, and so we just kind of eased into retirement and into when Ron passed away. Me and a guy named Steve Snyder from West Virginia joined the team in India full time. So that's kind of what brings us here, and I can't believe I grew up in Boonville and didn't know much about you guys. I don't know what it was about the Arkansas River. We just didn't associate much north of the river, I guess. But just know that I grew up not too far from here. We live in Hot Springs, and we're just a pleasure to be in here sharing with you some about India. Again, you heard my formal 2 years ago what. Let me just give you a poll. Who remembers us being here 2 years ago? All right. See, I didn't want to bore those of you who heard us and do the same thing over. So I'm going to do something a little different. We're going to slide through some of these slides, talk a little bit about India, and I'm hoping that you ask me a lot of questions. I want to springboard this morning. I have no notes in front of me. And if you have any questions about what we do, why we do it, anything about India, please ask. This is your chance. If not, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Okay? So believe me, you don't want to hear mine. I don't know what you think of. Is it working? Just kind of drift back. Gary, I'm sending her halfway to you just to see if the remote works. Everybody, this is my lovely wife, Diane. I love her being with me when I give these talks, because I can just hand the remote to her and just worry about talking. I don't have to go, okay, where are we? So she's going to slide through some slides. When you think of India, what do you think of? It is now the most populous country on the planet now. India surpassed this year, according to the UN, China. China put that weird law in that you can only have one kid for, 10, 20, 30 years maybe? And now India has surpassed. India, land-wise, is about 1/3 the size of the U.S. Think in terms of the Mississippi River to the east. That's India's land mass, with literally 1/5 of the world's population living in it. That's what I think of India. It is, I tell new people that go to India, if you like your privacy, your space, don't go to India. There is nowhere you will go, not even a rice field, where you feel like you're by yourself. I lost my slides. What else do you think of? Absolutely. When you read our newsletters, guys, yeah, here's some of the things. You think about the Taj, some of the greatest wonders in the world is in India. And I tell people, one of the things that I noticed my first trip to India is you'll see some of the most gorgeous things on the planet you'll ever see in this life. You'll see it in India, but right next to it will be some of the largest slums and not so beautiful things in the same eye shot. We in the West, we like to separate good town, north side of town, south side of town, Our slums aren't near the capital, That's not the case in India. It's just everything's just kind of there. Maybe you think of elephants. Man, India growing up to me was just this exotic, way out place. Man, I will never, ever go to some place like that. I was a little country guy that lived on a small farm right outside of Boonville and Greenwood. God has a sense of humor. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to travel anywhere. I just wanted to stay on the farm. And God said, sorry, here's an open door to India. Good luck. So that's kind of what took... you're talking about people. Guys, that's not a special occasion. There's nothing special going on. There's not a parade. This is just open up the doors. There's a street down there that you can't see because of all the people. And there you are. That's India. I forgot your name. AZ. AZ said one of the things he hears about India is conversions. And let me just cut to the chase. You hear a lot of numbers, and I don't want you to... It's easy for us Americans especially to go, man, we can't do that in our neighborhood. Surely that's not possible. Guys, 1/5 of the planet lives there. So if we say, hey, this congregation conducts 30 Bible studies or gospel meetings every month, they have opportunity every day that we don't have. And so it sounds a little odd. Yes, sir. That was about dead noon. And you know what? About midnight, it looked about the same. Just a different set of people. India's rule, about 73% of all jobs in India, guys, I remember talking to my grandparents about what it was like to be daily workers in a field. What it was like to just, if you had a pickup back in the day, you just wandered out in a hayfield, loaded up, sent it to the barn, and at midnight, the owner goes, here's your check. That's kind of the way it is in the rice fields, in all the agricultural fields in India. If you didn't work that day, guess what? You didn't get paid that day. Don't get me wrong. India's a third world country trying to become a second world country, and there's a lot of government jobs that are getting better and better. The average daily wage for an average guy is it's up to about $3 a day now. When I first started going to India, it was about 75 cents. Women, divide it in half. And that's what your daily wage was. So if you had a whole family, I remember my grandmother talking about, we were Southern Okies, and they would just kind of wander all the way to Arizona to pick cotton. And it reminded me of their days. You went out to the fields, you bagged your crops, you weighed them, you got paid. So when I talk about all these people, know that most of them are daily workers. Very few of them. India is just in the last 15 years creating a middle class, thanks to Bill Gates. The software, the Silicon Valley of the world is now in Hyderabad, India. So if you're calling Dell or Google, guess what? You're probably talking to an Indian, okay? So that middle class is growing, but most workers in India are just poor daily workers that live day to day to day. And they're the ones that fill our churches. It's not the wealthy. It's not even the middle class. It reminds you of the U.S., late 1800s, early 1900s. There's nothing else in the village to do. When we knock on the door and say, hey, we're going to have a big gospel meeting in the village today. You know what we're competing against? Nothing. There's nothing else going on in the village. So they'll come over to the house, or we'll block off a street and we'll have a meeting. There'll be 30, 60 people there. And some of you heard me say, well, why would you want to go to India? Well, what do we do? Because really, we don't speak the language. It's a Sanskrit language. There's 33 different official languages in India. We don't speak either language. But in that little village, if they hear that there's a Westerner in town, guess what? There's no longer 30, there's 300. On the farm, we call that a bell cow. Anybody know what that term is? I feel like a bell cow. So when I bring someone from the U.S. to go over there, man, word spreads. Schools shut down. There's an American in town. Sometimes our gospel meetings are at the school. They just shut it down. And the school gives us free reign. Why? Because you're going to be talking about God. And in India, India is the most religious nation on the planet. You don't have to talk about prayer or the importance of God. Now, that will argue with you which God, you know. But they're religious. And we say, hey, can I speak to the students of this school today? Always, always an open door. So just letting you know, that's the type of background that we do. She just went through all my... I don't want to scare you off with... In fact, in the last 2 or 3 years, you don't hear many people on our team even talk about numbers. They're almost unbelievable. We have probably... You got to sit down for this. Some of you may know this. The center of Christianity is no longer in the West. Did y'all know that? In India, we have a database. We've been working on this database for about a decade. Me, the last 2.5 years of finishing some of it up. I can tell you the names and addresses of 135,000 congregations of the Churches of Christ. Guys, that's more than North, Central, South America combined. Okay? And Africa tells us that they're close behind, you know? So the majority of congregations on this planet is not in the West anymore. They're Africa, India. The 1040 Joshua Project, anybody heard of that? If y'all keep up with the Joshua Project, there's a little window they call the 1040 window. We're in that window. 2/3 of the world's population is poor live in that little window, that little 1040 window. And that little window is the least evangelized window in all the planet. Only 1% of our mission efforts in the Churches of Christ go to that little 1040 window. And the majority of the planet's Christians seem to be in that Africa, Asia sector. Hey guys, if you're like me, I grew up in the 70s and 80s knowing that, man, we in the West, we were the king of churches. That's who we kind of reside. We're a Christian nation. We're a Christian. Guys, by the numbers, it's not us anymore. And so we have in our database not only 135,000 congregations, we have about 10,000 preachers that we are their support group. We're their encouragement. We're their resources. I mean, today we have 20th Century Christian, we have Harding, we have Oklahoma Christian, we have different universities that over the last century, when the Churches of Christ needed resources, they had a place to go to get them, whether it's teaching materials, whether it's Bibles, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if you're in India and you need a case of Bibles, they come to us. That's kind of what we do. We have Bibles in 33 different languages. Basically, in India, when you cross a state line, you're in a different language. You're in a different world. And so we supply churches resources, print material, teaching materials, things like that. That's kind of what we do. Diane and I, as we mentioned last time I was here, our responsibility on the team, and we have a team of 4 couples. After Ron passed away, we're down to 4 couples, and each couple on our Indian missions teams have different responsibilities. Diane and I, we're the education. So if you ask me, Joe, what do you do when you go up early? Yeah, thank you. We have these little campuses across India in about 5 different languages. And they're schools that range from 3-month schools to 2-year schools. And you say, Joe, why is the difference? There's some places, there's 3 growing seasons in India. And so when we ask the men of the congregation who are going to be the future leaders or preachers, guess how long of the year that they have to go to school? About 3 months. So that's why we take whatever time they've got. The months of April, May, and June are so hot or so flooded you can't farm. So they got some time. We say, hey guys, since you got time, come to our school. We got 5 main branches and 5 different languages. On top of that, we have 330 schools that we call extensional schools. Imagine, Roger, that this county, what is it? Am I in Crawford County? Yeah. Say Crawford County, there are 50 preachers. And they get together once a month, and they're there for about 4 hours, and we feed them lunch. And we feed them basically what is going to be their next month's sermon outlines or teaching material. We give them some lessons, and because they don't have access to a lot of resources, we have a class for them. And during that class, we get to do a lot of things. We get to not only know who they are and who their congregations are, but we get to know their strengths, their weaknesses. We get photos of their congregations. We know the names of their congregations. And we tell them, here's what we'll do. We will put you on our resource list that when you need things, I call it catch them in the act. If we help you helping your widows, and you're doing all that you can, because we know them, we'll jump in and help them help their widows in whatever manner that is. That's just an example. If they're building a building, and as you can imagine, when you have a congregation of 30 that half of them don't have a job, and the half that does, they make about $3 a day. It's going to take you a while to make a building. So what they'll do is the typical Indian congregation, when they can, they'll find some land that's donated to them. Maybe someone in the congregation donates it. Maybe some village elders donates it to them. And they'll start with a foundation, and they'll put up pillars and a roof. And if we catch them doing what they can do, we'll help them complete that building. And all they have to do is to join those little extensional schools that we call KCMBI schools that Ron set up years and years ago. But we have about 330 of those. So what Diane and I do, we go there, we do a lot of teaching. You'll see in the next hour, a preacher I'm not. I love teaching. I can teach all day. I love history. I love teaching Bible. That's kind of what we do. Any questions so far? I just threw a lot out there. I'm a little unscripted. One of our campuses has a hospital that's free to the community. You don't have to be Christian. Having different benevolent and social activities in India allows us to work freely in that county, in that area, without the government looking over our shoulder. They know we're here to help not just our Christians, our brethren in our churches, but we're here to help the whole community, and that opens some doors. And yes, sir.
Other than what you just mentioned, you get any pushback from the government?
Absolutely, all the time. Anybody reading the papers lately? There's a party called the BJP Party. In the last 15 years, has run havoc over churches. Now, let me preface this. Gandhi's party since the 50s has pretty much dominated. It's called the Congress Party. They've dominated, and they were very Christian friendly. You know why? They wanted our money. They wanted to see money go from the West to the government. And it was a big money thing. Since then, this BJP party, they miss the good old days of Hinduism. They see the people movement that's been going on since the 60s, since guys like J.C. Bailey and J.C. Shodes and guys like that have been, we call it the modern time of, for years, 300 years, no Westerners could go to India to evangelize, not legally. And if you got caught, you were persecuted. So once India gained its independence, those that were part of Britain's kingdom, like Canada, they started going in and started evangelizing again. And so really, the church is still kind of new in most of the states. There were a few churches when J.C. Bailey went over in the early 60s that he found. There's a guy by the name of, if any historians here, David McGavran. David McGavran went and right after the Civil War, maybe 5 or 10 years after the Civil War, and started a big Churches of Christ, Disciples of Christ, when they were together, a big effort. About 30 or 40 of those congregations were still there in the 60s. So a lot of the things that we're doing now is built on their works. Did I answer your question? I drifted, I know.
Well, that leads me to another question.
Hold that thought. Somebody beat you.
How do you deal with the language barrier personally?
Yeah, that's difficult for any Westerner. Not many can speak their languages fluently. Those of you who knew Ron personally, he knew quite a bit, but he couldn't have a conversation, just as we're having now. Even that was difficult. So when we go to India, we have a couple of things. You get a car and a driver, and when you get a car, the driver comes with it. Okay, that's just the way to do it. You rent a car, you can't drive it. There's a driver that comes with it, and we have a translator bodyguard. And I have a translator just almost everywhere I go. Yes, sir.
Where are you located in here? It sounds like you have a central location.
We do.
Like the congregations.
We have a main office. We have 2 or 3 offices, technically. But when we land in India, we normally land in Hyderabad. Hyderabad is where High Tech City is. If any of you know High Tech City, basically the Silicon Valley of the world now. And right outside of there is our headquarters. And the reason we headquartered there is because as Westerners, we can come and go, and they think we work for Google, or something, We just kind of fit in, When you go to the restaurant, it's, oh yeah, you must work for the government, or you're there. The last thing they think of us or see of us is that we're there for religious reasons, which is a bad thing if the BJP party knows much about you. They missed the good old days, like I said earlier, of when Hinduism was all that was. And during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s, as the church exploded, it scared them to death. It's probably why they got elected. The government just said, this is crazy. In about 1960, about 80% of the country were Hindu, 10% Muslim, 10% everything else. Christianity was in that everything else at about 2%. By the time about 2000 rolled around, the UN will tell you about 10% of the country is Christian. Those missionaries who work there know, no, that's not true at all. It was almost, if you count every denomination, including Catholicism, it was more like 21, 22%. And it scared the government to death. So what you're seeing the last decade is they're trying to reel that back in. They're making it hard for us to get money, to get resources. They're making it extremely difficult. There are hot pockets of radicals of Hinduism throughout India that if you're a missionary, you might better get out of town. They're persecuting congregations. And this is on top of, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but guys, when you convert from Hinduism to Christianity, you know what you have to do? By law, you have to go to what we would consider their county courthouse. They call it something else. But basically, it's where you change your caste. You change your political association. You are no longer permitted to vote with your Hindu caste. You have to register as a Christian. That has ramifications. When you register from Hinduism to Christianity, several things happen. First of all, you lose your civil rights. Do you know that? You don't have the right to dial 911. The police does not have to come to your house. to take a complaint. Your children that was going to public education, in India, it's all about how many seats your tribe has at the table to go to that school. Well, guess how many seats in every classroom can be Christian? 1, maybe 2 out of 30. Well, what if those seats are already filled? You know what happens? Your kids don't go to school. So how excited are you to convert to Christianity, go to the courthouse, and change your political status? I tell people all this all the time. In India, politics and religion are one and the same. You do not separate politics and religion. It's impossible. So when you convert and you have a government job, you may not have your job the next week because that job was filled with this certain caste in this certain district, in this certain area, because you were part of this political tribe, this political group. So I get a lot of questions. Joe, how faithful are they? Well, you know what? You know what that family has to do when they decide to become a Christian? Think long and hard. New elders, we struggle with this. When a congregation has new elders, one of the first things they grapple with is how open of Christianity are we wanting to be? Because the majority of them right now go, you know what? I'll be faithful anything. You just fill in the blank. I'm faithful, but I'm not going to go to the courthouse. I have no other way to educate my kids. And if that daughter doesn't get educated, she has no hope of a marriage ever. I saw a hand. World Bible School? I know them well, yes. Pardon me? World English? I know of them, not as much as I know Randy Davis well and John before him, and they do a great work of distributing not only Bibles, but information. I'm not as familiar with WEI. Okay, I know I just threw a lot out there. I have no idea what slides we're on. Some of us ask, what is it that Diane does? There are so few couples that go to India together. In fact, there are so few Western women that go to India. And once you go to India, you kind of understand why. It's not an easy trip. My first trip was in 1989, and India has come a long ways. There were only 7 paved roads in the whole country when I went there. The international airport had a dirt floor with no chairs. And there's nothing like driving on a road, needing a bathroom. Good luck. There is none. That ditch, that's what that ditch is for. Or that tree out there. So for women especially, traveling in India can be hard. Now if you stay in some of the mega cities, hey, the U.S., this will help put things in perspective. The U.S. has 2 mega cities over 10 million, L.A. and New York. If L.A. and New York were in India, India has 9 mega cities, and our 2 would be the smallest cities they have. In India, on our political map, if you're not a million, if your village is not a million, you're not on the map. You're not even on the map, anything less than a million. So only if you're in those big mega cities, that's become easier to travel. We hang a lot. That's where they have some Pizza Huts and KFCs, and you can get something in your stomach that doesn't explode all night long. India food's it's not the India food you get here. I assure you. Indians laugh at our India food, what we get. There's northern India and southern India, and most of the Christians, India has a Bible Belt too, just like the U.S. And most Indian congregations are in south central part of the country, and they like their food hot. And so once in a while, the Indian brethren will come over here and they'll eat some of the Indian food and say, oh, these guys are from the north. This food tastes horrible. And what I was getting at was, there's not many people, guys, that go to India. They're just not. And I get it. It's kind of, you see who makes up some of the Asian, I'm just not talking about India. I've got good friends in Mozambique. Someone in here just came back from Thailand. Who is that? Is that you? Okay. Chuck? Do you know the Carols? Yeah, okay. He's in Tennessee now, but just talking and visiting with the Carols. Thailand's a lot like India in that it's not the easiest place to live, guys. And there's not many people that go. But if I can tell you, what if the most open door, we do, we pray. I know it. I see your missions boards. I see what you guys do on the mission. You have a heart of missions. So I'm sure in your prayers you say, God, open us a door. Just show us. Well, guys, it's on the other side of the planet. It's the whitest fields. It's Asia. And there are more Bible studies than you can shake a stick at. There are more opportunities and open doors. And what Diane and I do is we struggle with some of the resources we give out to preachers from the schools. I know you got to be shaking your head going, surely this is not true. When preachers, and I don't take as many preachers to India as I used to, Roger, no offense. Preachers lose their voice after about 7 days, and they're useless the rest of the trip. You know why? Because you can have a Bible study every hour of the day. And when I say study, I don't mean one-on-one across the kitchen table. I mean there's 30 people sitting on the back porch. And right after you finish, Roger, they're going to go, did I do that? Man, I'm just getting warmed up. It's not unusual, Roger, for them at the end of a gospel meeting saying, listen, stay right here. Don't go anywhere. I got some family I want to bring over, and do that again. And you might get out by midnight. I'm a little calloused. I've been there a lot of years. I know how it works, so I'm not afraid to say no to a Bible study, so I have a voice tomorrow. Preachers don't. Preachers go, okay, I'm good to go. Let's go. And just lose it. Guys, I know I was a little all over the map. I didn't get to any of the slides I was showing you. Just letting you know that's about an average crowd, the church gathering together. You saw some pictures of some bicycles, some sewing machines. Just imagine anything the church needs. You help us provide resources to those churches. And most of those churches are young, they're immature, they've never had leadership. So much of our education system is developing leaders. We go up to a congregation, we'd say, listen, you guys are 20, 15, 30 years old. It's time to start thinking about Titus 1. Okay? There's something missing. A church without elders, there's something missing. There's something incomplete. And so I spend probably 80% of my time in India doing that, attacking that issue, of holding the hand of the preacher and the congregation and say, who are your future leaders? And let's teach you how to be a good leader. That's kind of what we do. Anything else? Last chance. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. The question is, unlike China, what's India like with families? I would say between 3 and 4 kids. 3 and 4 kids. A little bit, China's in the background. In India, it's very, very important to have a boy or more than one boy. And so if you're a family that has 2 or 3 girls, they'll keep trying until they get that boy. Absolutely. Okay, Roger, I'm out of time. Oh, one more. Yeah, I can't tell you the rate. I know it's the most populous right now. It's about 1.64 billion. I know between China and India, which are pretty much neck and neck, you're talking about almost half the world's population, about 43, 44%. So if you're a baby being born this year, you got a 50% chance of being somewhere in Asia. Isn't that crazy? That's how many people. Yeah, the question is about what's the average age. The life expectancy of a man in 1989, when I first went, was about 47. Now, the UN will tell you something else, but those who've been to India know it was more like in the high 40s. It's about 55, 56 now. Women, about 3 years less. That's about average. Guys, wonderful questions. I am so glad I didn't have to give you my old lecture speech that you heard 2 years ago. And at any time, just know, I'm a phone call, a text, an email away from any questions that you would ever have. All I wanted to do in this class was just give you a glimpse of what we do over there and how important you are. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you.